Hey guys, what's going on? This is David Chen. You're on another edition of Panama Mike's Podcast, New York Weekly's #1 podcast of 2020 and soon to be, and all the airports on Reach TV all across the nation, as well as Canada, and of course, our favorite place, the UK, coming soon. But first and foremost, a very good friend of mine, the one and only Justin Kenna, CEO of GameSquare, former CFO of FaZe Clan, which is where we met. And overall, extremely cool dude. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me, Dave.
My man, you are doing some killer things, man. I mean, you guys are just up, and away. So before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about yourself. Tell everyone where you're from and how you started getting into esports and the amazing process that got you here.
Yeah, for sure. So as you'll pretty quickly realize, I'm Australian, very Australian, haven't lost the accent. I live in LA. I've been in the US for about nearly 7 years now. So, I mean, time has definitely flown. But yeah, I started out actually working in sort of Big Four out of school. So accounting, corporate finance, consultancy background, and then actually moved into investment banking for a little while. Was sort of, had quite a broad background. So I got a lot of different technical skills, which I think has really, really helped me. Actually was running one of the Big Four banks, a strategy group for one of the Big Four banks in Australia, in Sydney, and then moved to LA, took a bit of a plunge, and was actually running a strategy and finance for a production company in West Hollywood, which were doing like a lot of music videos and TV commercials, like online snackable content, and was introduced to the guys at FaZe, and that was about 4 years ago. So that was a bit of a life-changing moment. I was, in a great job and really enjoying it. Definitely wasn't looking to leave. We were kind of looking to raise money and really growing. But, obviously saw, how quickly the industry was growing and also what a huge opportunity, right? FaZe Clan had this big audience, not as big as it is now, but a big audience, but no business. There was 8 people working out of a house, and took the plunge, joined FaZe, and spent the last 3 years as a CFO of FaZe Clan, and obviously we can get into the growth there as we chat more. But yeah, kind of finished up there on really good terms. Actually catching up with Lee Trink, the CEO of FaZe, tomorrow night for a drink, which will be good. But it's time for me to kind of go and try and run my own thing, and that's what we're doing. So as you said, CEO of GameSquare, and we're growing really quickly and doing some really cool stuff.
What's amazing about you, and a lot of people don't realize, is moving from one country to the next country, no matter if English is the same language, it's different. I mean, new contacts, new life, a totally new lifestyle, right? You're missing home. I know you're a very family-oriented man, and some of the crazy things that you've done. For most people to go from one country to another country, from a great, great job to take the plunge, as you said, it takes a lot of encouragement and guts. What was that critical factor for you to sit there and say, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to get it done?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I've been asked that before. I've always sort of had this thing about me that, I've had this kind of inner drive where, a lot of people will talk about doing stuff, and like, you have mates and you go and have a beer and they're not happy in their job or they're not happy in their relationship. I'm kind of the person who looks at the situation and wants the solution. And my whole thought process was, I've done the work. Like I did the study, I did the technical stuff. And I think, again, that's something that maybe seems to be a little missing these days. People want this sort of instant gratification, whereas I'd done the work. So I felt like while they are risks, they're pretty calculated risks. I came to the US and I wanted to experience living LA. Originally, I was only going to come for 2 years and go home because I did have a great job and great networks. But, things have turned out for me here, and, I miss home and love going back. But I think it's just having that inner drive and not sitting there and talking about something. Just do it, because, as much as it's a risk, you can always go back. I could have gone back to Australia and got a great job, and I would have been really happy. But, I think when things are there in front of you, it's a ruthless pursuit of short-term goals.
So what's interesting is, as we both came from the Big Four, similar backgrounds on the technical side of things. It's analytics, numbers driven, ROIs, KPIs, the whole nine, right? To be a calculator person, come in the US, and then go from what you were doing and doing a great company, snackable content, to joining FaZe in that initial phase. I don't think people really realize how much energy and work was done to get it to how amazing it's been, right? Yeah. And so you did that, but it was a risk, and it was a risk nonetheless that a typical guy like that is in the area that we're in, it's a little iffy, right? You have that entrepreneurial spirit. What made you sit there and analyze something of that magnitude and said, this is something we could do. This is something that I know I can make happen.
Totally. So I think there's kind of two parts to it. Like for me, the first part of what you said is so right. Like, I mean, there's no amount of me explaining it. Like being in the trenches of what we were building at FaZe Clan. Now you can look at FaZe Clan and go, amazing. Like you worked for this company at the right time. But you know, when I joined FaZe, as I said, it was 8 people working out of a house, or a lot of opinions. It was an industry that really wasn't monetizable at that point. It was an industry that investment dollars were not being spent in at that point. You know, when we went to go raise money, and people looked at the FaZe story and thought, oh, it's a compelling story. But, you know, the grey hair on Wall Street would say, how do you actually monetize this, right? And we were actually, you know, one of the companies that were the pioneers in terms of proving that out, you know, getting commercial deals, you know, fighting tooth and nail to actually build out a business. And again, you know, it's a sort of copycat industry, and it makes sense. But, you know, before FaZe, there really wasn't any orgs that were creating content and doing collaborations and really sitting at that intersection. So it's easy now to see that and see all these orgs following. But at the time, it was like, you know, it was some pretty new stuff, like to be able to open the doors at Champion and Supreme and some of these brands to do a brand deal with an esports company. Like, you know, now it's sort of talked about every day, but it certainly wasn't then. So, you know, it was tough for sure. I mean, you know, I funded payroll for a couple of months and things like that, like crazy stuff. But, you know, it was, from my perspective, similar to what I was saying before. I looked at it and, you know, I've always been someone who's wanted to build something and be a part of growth. And, you know, at FaZe Clan, I'll always look back at that and be so proud of what we did. And it sounds a little bit cliche and a little bit token, but, you know, I'll say like the 4 founders and a lot of the talent, you know, it was like family. Like we were all in it together, and it was tough work, but it was really rewarding. And it's definitely opened up, you know, it's definitely taught me a lot personally about different ways to monetize this industry and ways to approach and how we can kind of build an org that actually is profitable, because that's a little bit of an anomaly within this industry at the moment. But yeah, extremely rewarding, and I'll always be super thankful to FaZe in terms of, you know, the doors that it's now open for me to be able to go and do my own thing. And I think if you look at, like, you know, you look at, say, like Alabama in football, right? The kids that play under Nick Saban, or even the assistant coaches that coach under him, look at the things that they then get to go on to do. And that's the biggest compliment to him and that program. And I think FaZe is similar. I think you'll start to see a lot of people who are, you know, big players in that early growth of FaZe Clan go on and do some great things.
Yeah, it's amazing, because obviously, you know, as an investor and kind of seeing where you guys are doing, and that was about 3 years ago at this point, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I can't believe 3 years has passed by, and seeing the growth and development, it was very strategic. If you could, as a CFO at that time, and you give perspective to another org, you know, a young kid out in the Midwest who's trying to do it, what would be some of the piece of advice that you would give them ahead of time so that they can also grow and learn and be as successful as you've been?
Yeah, I would say do the work. Like, I know it sounds easy, but like when you're reading books, you know, and look, people are different. So, you know, a lot of people are into Tony Robbins and into different motivational speakers. That's never really been my avenue, but I'd spend more time reading technical books and learning your technical skills, rather than reading, you know, how to get rich or somebody else's journey, right? Because everybody's unique. So I think, like, for me, it's learn your stuff, learn your skills, and back yourself in to a point where, I know this sounds a little bit cocky, but that you're better than other people, right, at what you do. And that's through hard work. And then the next part of it is sort of learning, okay, how do I actually translate that commercially? And that's through experience. So go out and get a job and start working and experiencing. And then I think the next part is, how do I then communicate my technical skills into commercial actions and be able to communicate that not only to market but to shareholders but to clients. And I think that's what it is, right? And once you get the confidence at those three sort of levels, it is a little bit about taking risks, right? Because I get emails all the time, and apologies to anybody that I don't respond to because it is tough. But you get emails from kids at college who are studying accountancy and they want to know how to get into esports and gaming. I'd say do the study, do your work, be really good at whatever your skill set is, if it's operations, if it's strategy, if it's accountancy, whatever that is, and then apply for these jobs and don't take no for an answer, right? Just keep going, but do the work.
And that's amazing. I think in this world and in the esports world, a lot of the guys have a misconception of doing the work, right? They're doing one part of it, they're not doing the other part of it. You talked about the technically sound stuff. That will always give you an opportunity to do something because you need those technical guys. But the problem, the life inside that we're in is it's instantaneous gratification, right? That's a common thing. When you were in FaZe, you mentioned you had to float payroll for a couple of months, right? You're staring down this gun. You have this big org. You know what you're trying to build. You have to keep a certain level of confidence, but with a certain level of reality, and still have to completely believe in yourself and the people around you to make this work. How did you do that? And how did you maintain that? Because most people just quit, but you didn't. How did you pull that off?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's challenging, right? Like, I looked at it and at the start, Lee wasn't actually the CEO when I started, but he was an investor, and Lee was really helpful along the way, and a few other senior people like Greg Selko, who's now gone on to run XZ, and a few others that I was able to lean on who've had experience. It's tough, right? Like even if you're onto a company that you really believe in, and that there's still a time, like when we were going to raise money for FaZe Clan at the start, there was a lot of uncertainty about the industry, right? As I was alluding to before, and there were times where you need to spend money to make money, right? We weren't worried about profitability, but we needed to go and raise money, and there were months where I'd be daily looking at the bank statement and cash flow and managing things here and there. And now you kind of look at it, and obviously FaZe Clan's on the Forbes, one of the most valued lists at north of 300 million. I'd say it's worth more than that now. I mean, when they get to a liquidity event, whether that's an IPO or a SPAC or a private sale, I'd say they'll be well north of that. So I think it's really just about, you have to have a belief in who you're working for. And I don't mean this in a corny way of, I don't like when you get on Instagram, you see these guys who are like, live your dream and do whatever you're passionate about. Like for some people, that's not reality. Like I totally get that. You also need a job that pays your bills, right? So what I'd say is, if you're in something where you're putting risk into it, you're getting equity and you're putting risk on the line, then believe in what that is. If you're just doing a job to get a paycheck, to pay the bills and look after your family, do whatever, that's totally fine as well, right? But if you're going to put risk on the line, I think that's when it comes into, you have to have an inner belief in the company, what you're building and who you're building it with. And, that changes along the way as well as you get bigger. You're not a startup anymore and things start to change and whatever, right? But I think that's what it is. And I really did from the get-go. I believed in what FaZe Clan was as a brand. And it makes it a lot easier to sell, right, when you're fully behind something.
Yeah, it's super amazing, man. I remember my interactions with you. Loved all the guys. Love you the most. I always tell you that. Nicest guy. We could always talk about financials. But one thing I loved about you was you went beyond what I would consider, a typical CFO. You were not just hustling and bringing in people, balancing the books, trying to keep everyone calm. No one understands life as CEO. The fact that you have a full set of hair and the fact that I have a full set of hair, I have no idea how we both have it. But you were the one who did it. And then you started bringing in the contacts, right? Like Ben Simmons. Those are guys that you knew, that you win, and you really developed that core thing. But you're very likable. And I think a lot of people realize in this industry, or in industry in general, being nice goes a long way. Wouldn't you agree?
For sure. And I think it's not only nice, right? It's about being genuine. Because for me, I think, I probably used to be nicer, as when you deal with a lot of stuff every day, your patience draws a bit thin. And I always try to remember to have more patience and be as nice as possible. But also when you're running a business, whether it was FaZe Clan then or GameSquare now, there's a lot of pressure on you, right? So you need to be able to treat people fairly, but also know when to be tough as well, right? And I think for me, I definitely, I'm genuine, right? So whether that's nice, I hope so. At times it may not be, but I think I'm fair and I think I'm genuine. And I think that's really important in this industry, not only with people you work with and clients and shareholders and whoever, but when you start to work with celebrities and integrating people, I think it resonates, right? Like I've been able to build really meaningful relationships with some of these people because, I don't want anything from them, and I'm happy with who I am, and I'm building something really cool. And I think that those best relationships are organic, right? It's not like we're going to bring a celebrity in, so we expect you to do 20 posts of our new merch, and there's all these deliverables because gaming to them is fun, right? So you want to bring them in and you want to build an organic relationship where they're getting as much from you as you're getting from them. And then that's how you build meaningful relationships, I think, in life. But yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I think being genuine, not only in this industry, I mean, in any, but in this day and age, I think is more important than ever.
That's amazing. Now you became, CEO of GameSquare, crazy numbers, giant announcement today. Tell us about the announcement, what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so look, GameSquare is a little different to FaZe Clan. We're actually hoping to partner with FaZe on a few different projects, which will be really cool. We're really sitting in between brand and audience. So, within gaming, as we kind of talked about, there's a lot of orgs still burning a lot of cash. We're really trying to focus on the high margin areas. So we're building out digital marketing, sort of media businesses within gaming and esports. The market's super fragmented. So we're able to actually make accretive M&A acquisitions, smart acquisitions in private agency world, bringing them into, the public world. We're publicly traded on the CSE. Our ticker's GSQ if you want to take a look. But, being able to make multiples on those acquisitions in the public markets and then help them, right? Give them access to capital, give them some liquidity, help them with structure, with strategy, with, being able to tap our networks, helping with the sales funnel and pipeline. So we're in a really good spot. We've got 4 assets currently, soon to be more. Obviously can't say too much there, but we've got some big stuff coming. Still looking at team-based orgs, but not high cash burning, high capital sort of team org. So there's some interesting opportunities there as well that we're looking at. But at the moment, we have an influencer agency in the UK. We have an ad sort of media and marketing agency here in LA. We actually have a League of Legends team in Mexico City, and we have a Crossfire team in China. So we're starting to really work on the strategy there. They've got a lot of eyeballs and a lot of cross-selling. But yeah, I mean, we're cooking with gas. We did an RTO in October at around 20 cents. We're trading around double that now. It's 100% growth, sort of 6-7 months later. And, we think this is really just the beginning. We have a lot of growth ahead of us. And yeah, as you said, we've been able to bring in some really high caliber people and got some really exciting announcements, that are coming soon. But we had an announcement today, announcing Tony Hawk, who's joining our advisory board, which is, huge. We had Jordan Belfort join our advisory board a month or so ago. And I mean, Jordan's been amazing. And Jordan's the type of guy, once you get to know him, you kind of realize, like, the guy's a genius, but he's a very approachable guy. And then, you've got Tony coming in, who, Tony's background it speaks for itself, right? He's so iconic. He changed the face of his sport forever. He's a family man and he's a businessman. He's been very successful at both. And, from a gaming org perspective, could you want a better ambassador or advisor, right? Like somebody who not only has been a cultural icon, is a businessman, has such a great reputation. He really is just genuinely a great person. But he also has his own video game, right? Which is so hugely successful as well. So there's lots of cool stuff that we can do there. Having Tony's ear is great. Having his audience is great. Being able to utilize him But then also, having our agency business work with him and his agency as an agency that he owns in Detroit, and hopefully being able to tap into Activision with different things they're doing with his video game, and some really cool stuff in the works there.
That's amazing. As you accelerate and you get Jordan Belfort, the Wolf, you get Tony Hawk, the guy, very first skateboarder who had his own video game, right? Like, we're old enough to remember that. Some of the young kids might not remember that, but that was a first. Like, it was a major thing and it was a major deal. And now it's come full circle where we're at. Where do you see the future of esports going and gaming?
Yeah, it's such an interesting one, right? Like, a couple of years ago, everyone was just saying esports, and then Fortnite came along and kind of changed the game, and everyone says esports and gaming because I'm sure most of your podcast listeners probably understand, but for those that don't, obviously esports is the pro part of gaming, and gaming is gaming's been something that people have done forever, but people haven't necessarily thought about the monetization of it, right? It was more of a hobby, and I think Fortnite was a really interesting one because especially when I look at like FaZe, right, and the business model out of FaZe, in terms of you have your pro players that get paid a fixed salary and they travel the world and they play in tournaments. And when I think about that, I think of Call of Duty and Counter-Strike and PUBG and Rainbow Six and these types of esports. And then Fortnite came along, and a lot of these kids came along and they didn't want fixed salaries and they didn't want contracts because they wanted to kind of be content creators. So these kids were making more money streaming on a Tuesday night than they would be flying around the world playing in tournaments. Kind of changed the game a little bit. So I think it's a really interesting one. I don't think anyone can really answer the future. I think the future's north, right? In terms of specific games, there are certain games that I think have longevity within esports, and they're your Counter-Strikes and your Call of Duties and these types of games. But overall, our sort of philosophy has been to steer clear of the franchise model largely. I mean, we'd look at doing a licensing type deal like what FaZe did with the Atlanta FaZe opportunity. But from my perspective, putting up $20-30 million of capital into a league, into a game, like look at Overwatch and look at it's hard to sit here and say I'm going to put $30 million into a team in a franchise league, and I can't tell you when my return's going to come. Might be say in the 5 to 10 year mark if that game's still going to be relevant, right? So for me, the future is content. The future is media. The future is positioning yourself, within this space, because this is a new form of entertainment. Like I've used this example before, but I look at what WWE and then WWF wrestling was, and what the UFC is. They're media businesses, right? They're a form of entertainment. And I think gaming is that. Gaming is you have the pro side of it, which can be akin to traditional sports. But I think the gaming component is larger than the esports component. I think esports has a future. I think prize monies get bigger. I think those that are investing in team orgs, they will take a turn. I think they will start to derive value. I think there's some valuations out there currently that aren't realistic. So I do think there's going to be some hard conversations over the next 12 to 18 months. And that's why we're positioning ourselves, in profitability land or somewhere on a trajectory to that. But yeah, I mean, the future of this space for me, Dave, and interested to hear your thoughts as well, is really around content, right? And it's the mix between gaming and esports, and it's connecting brands to this huge audience. And that's how you monetize this space, I believe, and it's through content and streaming and integrating brands.
I mean, everything that you said, we've not had this conversation, I think it's right on the money. I think when you spend $25-30 million for an organization that you don't know how long a game is going to be there, if it's going to be hot, if it's not going to be, if it's going to be taken over like Fortnite was, who now I think as of today was a $30 billion valuation, right? Like, it's unbelievable, these numbers that exist. But to pay that money, you have to get something back. And I think that's a giant discrepancy, like you said. And so I think you're 100% right. I think on the content side, content is king. We've always said that. We always know that the digital space is what it is. I mean, I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying. I mean, that's why you are the CEO of GameSquare and the CEO of FaZe Clan, because you do absolutely get it, and you see it from a very critical point of view that Wall Street and shareholders are going to like, which I think there's that common discrepancy. Unless you came I don't say unless you came, but we came from the Big Four, right? So we understand that those are real numbers that have to make sense, and there's a quality valuation, but there's a realistic valuation. And I think you're 1,000% on the money with that one, man. I absolutely.
Totally. It's interesting, right? Because I think there was this sort of, say roughly sort of 4 years ago, there was this kind of 12 to 18 month period where people weren't really investing in esports yet. Not really. Like there was some orgs getting some money, but no real investment dollars. And then there was sort of this boom of, it's kind of like the back end of these progressive investments, like the marijuana, like the weed market, right? Now these progressive investors starting to invest into esports and gaming. And then you had this sort of 12 to 18 months of people starting to invest in it. And then you had this kind of 12 months where there's huge dollars being spent in it because COVID happens and everybody looks at this new digital world and it's like gaming, esports everywhere. It's like we have to be in it. And then there was sort of some dumb money coming in. Whereas I think prior to that, it really wasn't. It was smart. It was smart money. It was money from people who got the spaces, money from people who educated themselves. And then there was sort of some dumb money that came in because people rushed because they thought we have to be in this industry. Now we're at this really interesting spot because, the industry, again, it's only going north. And if you look at all the key metrics, revenue, dollars spent in this market, hours watched, viewership, dollars spent by brands, and they're all going north. And it's going to continue to go north. But what's going to happen is exactly to what you were saying, Wall Street's going to look at this and say, well, I'm paying 20 times sales for a company that's burning $10 million a year. Okay, where's the trajectory to profitability? And that's the next 12 to 18 months and probably 24 to 36. As this market matures, it's now about how do you position yourself for profitability. And that doesn't mean that every org has to be profitable. It doesn't mean that every acquisition has to be profitable. But you have to understand how to monetize the space and be on a path to achieving that. Otherwise, there's going to be some really difficult conversations.
Would you consider that to be one of the biggest risks in the actual industry and space right now is the realization of monetization that it actually has to happen? Those valuations can no longer exist?
Totally. I think it's a risk. It depends on, again, where you're positioned, right? And you're starting to see, a lot of these private company orgs that have been more traditional orgs starting to, build up their sponsorship teams and their sales teams and try to build content arms and media arms and partner with those types of businesses. And I think if you do that well, you can pivot. But that's what you need to do, right? And I'm not saying to move away from the team-based model. I'm saying that's great, especially for eyeballs and for cross-selling, but you need to have the ability to sell into those assets, right? So if you have those assets, you need to build the vertical revenue streams. But yeah, I do think it's a risk, absolutely. If you're going to sit in a pure team-based org, I think it's a big risk. Me personally, I wouldn't invest my money there, but I think there are some orgs out there. If you can plug in a media solution and a sales pipeline and funnel, sky's the limit, right?
Right. When you see corporate America, let's talk about, the bigger names. You were there for the Nissan, deal with FaZe. You've done a lot of big deals with, GameSquare. When these big corporations are coming in and they don't really understand it, right? And going from there, what would be a typical thing or suggestion that you would do to allow them to understand it? Do you think it's more based on visibility, the content, you're not hitting the numbers, or is this more a long-term play for them to get the community long-term as they're younger growing older? What do you think those aspects are that are pivotal for this type of stuff?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, when I started at FaZe, we had an energy fuel partner and an energy drink. And we did a deal with them, which was meaningful revenue at the time. They wanted to do a 3-year deal. And we looked at it, and that was meaningful revenue, but we backed ourselves in. So we did a 12-month deal. We proved out our worth and our value. And then we renewed it the next year for 5 times the deal the year before. And it's now at about 15 times what it was, 3 or 4 years later. And there's so many examples of that. So my advice would be, don't just jump at the dollars and lock yourselves into a long-term deal. The numbers don't lie, right? So I think number one is when you bring a Verizon or a Nissan or a Burger King or whoever to the table, then you have to show them the audience, you show them the numbers, you show them who you're reaching and how you're reaching them, and you work out what's important to them, right? And you work out how to reach that audience. Now, that's one part of it. They have to actually then feel that. So again, it's similar to what I was talking about with when you're bringing in celebrities. It's like an organic thing. Don't go away and try and lock up some long-term deal. Do a project together. Do something small. Do something. Take the low-hanging fruit. Prove your value. Prove your worth. And then you'll get the long-term deals with the big dollars. Like, COVID's an interesting one. At FaZe, we pivoted really quickly and really well. And we started doing a lot of online Fortnite competitions and bringing in celebrities and bringing in brands and doing charity stuff. We pivoted really well to our content business. And it was interesting because there are a number of brands who traditionally invest in traditional sports, and traditional sports weren't on. So we were already obviously seeing dollars being spent in esports and gaming, but esports is one of the only live sports at that time. So you've got like a McDonald's or someone, right, who might spend X amount in the LA Kings, but the LA Kings aren't playing. So some of that money they're looking at, okay, where do we deploy this capital? Cool, esports, gaming, FaZe Clan. Those clients that came over during that time, it's about proving value, and we proved so much value to them in the audience that they reached. They were blown away, and they'll be clients for life, right? So it's about not just looking at revenue and signing it away and getting excited. Take the low hanging fruit, prove your worth, because a lot of this industry is about knowing your value, and so you got to prove that out.
I love that, man. Knowing your value, adding value, proving your worth, testing it, going from there. This is why your numbers have doubled, because they have a genius CEO. And I don't say that often. I'm not saying that because you're my friend. I'm telling you that because I believe that your strategy is 1,000%, 100% true in what it's trying to do. Before we go, I just want to ask one more thing. There's a little kid out there right now who really wants to make it, right? Who really wants to be, either the next CFO or the next big content creator. What piece of advice can you give them on succeeding their goals like you have?
Yeah, totally. I mean, again, I don't think that it's necessarily like some secret sauce. I think it's hard work. It's hard work, and it's backing yourself in, and it's being willing to take risks, but calculated risks, right? Like, doesn't mean go and do something stupid. It means do the work, know your value, back yourself in, and take risks to achieve that. Because at the end of the day, if you've got to go back and do the job that you used to do for a bit longer because you're not quite there or the opportunity's not quite, that's okay, right? Like, a lot of people make it later in life. There's no path. I'd say don't look at, it's fine. Social media is fine, and it has its purposes, but don't look at the guy across from you and compare yourself, and don't worry about other people's paths. Back yourself in, do the work, know your value, and take your own path.
I love it, man. And give us that ticker symbol again for GameSquare.
Yeah, so we're on the CSE. It's GSQ, GMSQF on pink sheets in the US at the moment. But we're working on our OTC listing currently, so that should be up and going the next couple of months, and then we'll hit the US market hard, and we've got some really cool stuff coming. And
of course, give them your social media handles as well.
Yeah, I'm actually not on Twitter. I probably should do that, get that sorted out. But my Instagram is jkenna44, which is JKENNA 44.
The man with the plan, the guy who knows it all, Mr. Kenna. Justin, I appreciate you, buddy. Thanks for all your time. Thanks for reaching out to all our podcast listeners. Listen to this man. He knows what he's talking about. For David Chen and Panos Podcast, my friend Justin Kenna, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you.